Hey everyone, Jonathan here with Iron Forge Consulting Group. Coming at you today from being on shift here on the ambulance. I want to talk a little bit about wound packing today. What it is, why we're going to do it, what we're going to use, and how we are going to go about doing that. So stay tuned. So when we talk about wound packing, what is wound packing? Well, it's when we have some sort of penetrating trauma into the body, specifically in the junctional areas, right? So these are the areas where the limbs or the neck meet the body, and it's not a wound that is amenable to a tourniquet, right? So we cannot, it's too high into the body to apply a tourniquet, but we have got uncontrolled bleeding that we need to deal with. So the best way we can deal with that is by packing material in there, kind of holding in the blood. We want to hopefully form a clot, right? Clots in this instance are not a bad thing, right? We want to form a clot in that bleeding artery. So it is essential that we have the tools and the knowledge to be able to do that. A couple things we are going to use to pack wounds, right? So we have got a hemostatic agent, right? A couple different varieties of those. These are both made by the same company under the brand Clot, right? One is a more militarized version, right? It comes in the green packaging called Combat Gauze. It's a different length. You get a 3-inch by 4-yard section, and then we also have the Clot EMS rolled gauze. Both of these are hemostatic agents, right? So what that means is they are impregnated with a chemical that aids in clotting. And that's what we really want to do, is we want to help form a clot so we can control that bleeding. In addition to forming that clot, we are also applying pressure to that. So wound packing, right? So we're going to pack this directly into the wound right next to the artery. So let's talk about those junctional areas, right? So we talked about where the limbs and the neck meet the body. So we've got that area right there, and on the neck we've got the underarm, right? And then we've got into the groin area. Those are the places where you are primarily going to pack a wound. First, we want to say that if it is amenable to a tourniquet, it needs a tourniquet. If it is not, then it gets packed. When we are talking about packing wounds, we may end up using all of our hemostatic agent. We may end up having a wound that's bigger than the amount of hemostatic agent we have. So we want to come behind that with a packing gauze material. Regular rolled gauze or Kerlex work perfectly fine for that. So that's what you want to have on hand. Is you've got your hemostatic agent, then you've got your packing gauze. So you come in behind that and pack that, and that just continues to add pressure into that wound cavity, and we don't have to hold digital pressure with our hands and our fingers. On top of that, what we're going to do is put a pressure dressing. They make commercial pressure dressings. This is the emergency bandage. It is essentially what was previously known as an Israeli dressing. It's the same thing, just a different name, be a little more politically correct, but it is the same thing, right? It has some sort of elastic material, an absorbency pad, and then some sort of device that allows additional pressure to be applied. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to show you the process for packing a wound. So the first thing that we want to do is remember our personal protective equipment and apply our gloves. This is going to be a very, very bloody, messy endeavor. And you are also going to be placing your fingers inside of the wound. We do not want to cause any additional harm to this person, right? So that's another reason we want to wear gloves, and we don't want to put any germs that are on our hands inside that wound channel. For the purposes of training, we're going to be just using regular gauze, but understand that this is a stand-in for our Clot or our hemostatic agent. The reason we're using regular gauze to demonstrate this is because the Clot is expensive. So we open our gauze material. What I like to do is I like to tie a knot and the end of the material that I'm going to be packing in. What this does is it gives us a point to apply pressure. So what we'll do, we will digitally place a finger inside the wound channel. When we think about the anatomy of the body, we have to think about the directions that blood flows, and we're going to be packing towards the trunk of the body, towards the torso of the body, because that is where your heart is and that is where the blood flow is going to. So what we'll want to do, we'll find the bleeding artery. Okay, I have found it with my finger. What I'm going to do next, I've already pulled my hemostatic agent out of my packaging. I've tied my power ball into it. I'm going to, without removing my finger on the bleeding artery, I'm going to pack into the wound, and that power ball goes directly against the bleeding artery. Okay, what I can do now is I can continue to pack, right? And I'm feeding, and one finger is staying in contact with that bleeding artery. I can do a, put one finger in, replace the other finger, that sort of motion, but I want to maintain contact with that bleeding artery. Now, let's say it's a shallow wound and we've packed it as full as it'll go. What we can then do is wrap the wound, and then we do not have to come back with a packing gauze. But let's say it's a large wound. At this point, we've used all of our hemostatic agent. It is working. Here's how we know it's working. Bleeding is being controlled, and it has not soaked all the way through the hemostatic gauze. If we run into an issue where the hemostatic gauze is completely soaked, we want to pull the hemostatic gauze out. That it goes counter to what we were taught prior to this, where we just keep packing stuff in there. But the reality is if the hemostatic gauze is soaked through, the chemical that is impregnated in there is not getting into that bleeding artery to help create a clot. So current tactical combat casualty care recommendation and guidelines are pull it out, replace it with fresh hemostatic agent. If you do not have a fresh hemostatic gauze to put in there, use regular gauze. Most hemostatic gauze require 3 minutes of direct pressure to be applied. My suggestion to everybody, instead of using your pointer fingers, use your thumbs. If you've ever tried to hold direct pressure for 3 minutes with just your pointer fingers, you're going to be really, really tired at the end of that. So we're going to use our thumbs, and then we can hold a little bit more pressure. We could even apply some upper body pressure. So a couple other things about hemostatic agents, specifically Quick Clot. Quick Clot as a brand, they have a couple different options. So the EMS rolled gauze, it is just hemostatically impregnated gauze. The combat gauze, as well as some of their law enforcement options, it's all the same stuff. It's all the same hemostatic agent, but they have a couple different varieties. The combat gauze has a blue strip running all the way through it, and what that is a radio opaque strip that is visible on an x-ray. And that just ensures that if you pack a wound and you take these people to a trauma center, that once the trauma surgeon looks at the wound, they can make sure they get all of that out of there, and it reduces the possibility of infection. Additionally, remember, we're going to hold pressure for at least 3 minutes. For the majority of instances when we talk about hemostatic agents, across the board, 3 minutes is the commonly accepted time frame per the manufacturer, but each manufacturer is different, so I would encourage you to look at the manufacturer's instruction for their product. For Quick Clot, it's 3 minutes. Additionally, we are not going to be packing abdominal wounds, right? So we're only packing junctional wounds. So that means the groin, the underarm, and the neck area. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. This has been Jonathan with Iron Forge Consulting Group. Hey, remember, be harder to kill, train more.